Glass shattered. A deafening crash echoed through the house. Daniel barely dodged the heavy vase that flew past his head, smashing against the wall behind him. His wife, Emily, stood across the room, chest heaving, her hands clenched into fists. Her eyes, once full of warmth, were now filled with something else: rage, desperation, maybe even madness. "You did this to me," she screamed, her voice raw. Daniel's heart pounded. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Just hours ago, he had walked into their home thinking it was an ordinary evening. He had no idea his life was about to fall apart in the worst way possible. The living room was in chaos, shattered photo frames littered the floor, furniture was overturned, and shards of glass crunched under his feet as he took a step back. Emily wasn't just angry. She was unhinged. Daniel took another slow step, hands raised. "Emily, stop. Let's talk." "Talk?" She let out a bitter laugh. "You think we can talk after what you did?" "What I did?" His stomach twisted. She was the one who had cheated. He had seen it with his own eyes. Hours earlier. Daniel had been working late. The office was quiet, the hum of fluorescent lights the only sound in the empty space. He glanced at the clock, 11:17 p.m. Too late for dinner, too early to sleep. He rubbed his temples. Emily hadn't responded to his texts all evening. "Everything okay? Emily? Coming home soon? You up?" No reply. A sinking feeling settled in his chest, but he brushed it aside. She had been distant lately, moody, distracted. Maybe she was just tired. On the drive home, the streets were nearly empty. A cold drizzle had started, the raindrops blurring the city lights. He turned onto their quiet suburban street, parking a few houses down. The porch light was off, which was odd. Emily always left it on for him. As he stepped inside, something felt off. A pair of unfamiliar shoes sat by the door. Large, black sneakers. His pulse quickened. A faint sound came from upstairs. Laughter. A man's laughter. For a second, he couldn't move. No. It couldn't be. Then, his feet carried him forward before his mind could stop him. Step by step, he climbed the stairs, his breath shallow, his hands clammy. The bedroom door was half open. The laughter had stopped. And then, he saw it. Emily. In bed. With another man. The air was sucked from his lungs. His ears rang. Emily's eyes went wide as she saw him standing there. "Daniel." He turned and walked out. She called after him, but he didn't stop. Outside, the cold air hit his face, but it did nothing to numb the burning in his chest. He stumbled down the driveway, hands shaking, stomach twisting. This isn't real. This isn't happening. But it was. Minutes passed. Maybe an hour. He wasn't sure. He sat in his car, staring at the rain hitting the windshield, replaying the moment over and over. His phone buzzed. "Emily. Daniel, come back inside. We need to talk." Talk? What was there to talk about? He started the car. Drove. Nowhere in particular, just away. His thoughts were a blur. Memories of their wedding day, the vacations, the lazy Sundays on the couch. Had it all been a lie? Had she been cheating for months? Years? At some point, he found himself parked outside their house again. He had nowhere else to go. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out of the car. His body felt heavy, like he was moving through water. Inside, the house was dark. Quiet. Then, a sound. Not from upstairs. From the kitchen. Footsteps. He followed them, his heart pounding. Emily stood by the sink, hands gripping the counter. The man was gone. "You came back," she whispered. Daniel said nothing. She turned to face him, her eyes red, makeup smudged. "Daniel, Don't," he said, his voice hoarse. "Just don't." A beat of silence. Then, her expression shifted. The sorrow disappeared. The guilt faded. Something else took its place. Anger. "You left," she snapped. "You walked out like a coward instead of facing me." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I faced enough." "You don't understand," she yelled. "You never did." She grabbed a glass from the counter and threw it at the wall. It shattered. Daniel flinched. "Emily, stop. You don't get to tell me what to do." Her hands were shaking. Her whole body trembled. "Do you think I wanted this?" she hissed. "Do you think I planned for this to happen?" He exhaled, forcing himself to stay calm. "You made a choice. And so did you." Daniel frowned. "What are you talking about?" She let out a bitter laugh. "You checked out of this marriage a long time ago." He blinked. "That's not true." "Yes, it is." Her voice cracked. "You were never here. Always working, always too busy for me." Daniel's throat tightened. "That doesn't justify what you did." Emily's eyes darkened. "Maybe not. But you don't get to play the victim." He clenched his fists. "I'm not playing anything, Emily. I lost my wife tonight." She laughed, a hollow, joyless sound. "Oh, Daniel. You lost me a long time ago." Silence filled the space between them. Then, before he could react, she grabbed a vase from the table and hurled it straight at him. He ducked just in time. The vase crashed against the wall. His heart pounded. "This is getting dangerous. Emily." She lunged at him. Daniel barely had time to react. She clawed at him, shoving him backward. His back hit the edge of the counter, pain shooting through his ribs. "Emily, stop," he shouted. But she wasn't listening. Something wild flashed in her eyes. And then she grabbed the knife from the counter. Daniel froze. The room spun. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, Emily raised the knife. Daniel's blood ran cold. And everything went black. Darkness. A ringing sound filled his ears. A deep, hollow echo. Then, pain. A sharp, searing pain pulsed through his skull as Daniel's consciousness flickered. His body felt heavy, trapped in some kind of fog. His eyes fluttered open. The room swayed. His vision blurred. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was. Then it hit him. Emily. The fight. The knife. Where is she? Panic surged through his chest as he struggled to sit up. His head throbbed. The back of his skull was wet. He reached up and winced as his fingers brushed over something warm and sticky. Blood. The house was silent. Too silent. Slowly, he forced himself to his feet, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter for support. His legs wobbled beneath him. His heart pounded. What happened? His last memory was Emily lunging at him. But then, nothing. Had she hit him? Had he blacked out? He scanned the room. The kitchen was a disaster. The broken vase lay in shards across the floor. The overturned chairs. The dent in the wall where something heavy had crashed. But no sign of Emily. Then, he saw it. The knife. Lying on the floor near the fridge. Clean. Untouched. Daniel's breath quickened. Did she leave? His hands shook as he reached for his phone. He needed to call someone. The police? A friend? His fingers fumbled to unlock the screen. No signal. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead. His house always had service. Was it a coincidence? Or something worse? His mind raced. Emily wouldn't just leave. Not like this. Then, movement. A faint creak from upstairs. Daniel stiffened. Someone was still in the house. His pulse thundered as he stepped out of the kitchen, moving toward the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. His breath was uneven. Another creak. The sound of a door closing. The bedroom. A terrible thought struck him. What if she wasn't alone? The man she had been with, was he still here? His fists clenched. He should leave. Walk out the front door and never come back. But something inside him refused. He needed answers. He reached the top of the stairs. The hallway stretched ahead, dimly lit by the bathroom nightlight. The bedroom door was ajar. A shadow moved inside. His stomach twisted. Daniel pushed the door open. The room was a mess, sheets thrown aside, clothes scattered. The smell of cheap cologne lingered in the air. But Emily wasn't there. The bathroom door was shut. A muffled sound came from inside. A sniffle. A ragged breath. Daniel swallowed hard. He raised his hand, hesitated, then knocked lightly. Emily? Silence. Then, go away. Her voice was hoarse, shaking. Daniel exhaled. What happened? No answer. Emily, The door flung open. Emily stood there, her face pale, eyes puffy. Her hair was a mess, makeup smeared across her cheeks. But it was her hands that made Daniel's blood run cold. They were covered in blood. A sick feeling crawled up his spine. Emily, what did you do? She let out a broken laugh. I fixed it. His eyes darted past her, into the bathroom. The shower curtain was pulled shut. A dark red smear streaked across the white tile floor. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He stepped back. Tell me that's not. Emily took a shaky step forward. You wanted him gone, didn't you? Daniel's stomach lurched. His head spun. Emily, what did you do? His voice barely came out. She blinked, tilting her head. You left me, Daniel. You abandoned me. And he was here. He was the only one who stayed. Daniel's heart pounded. His mind screamed at him to run. To call for help. But he couldn't move. Emily reached for his hand, smearing blood onto his skin. We can fix this. Together. Daniel yanked his hand back. Are you insane? Her expression twisted. You always called me crazy. Always made me feel like I wasn't enough. He shook his head. This isn't about us, Emily. There is a dead body in our house. Her lips curled into a slow smile. Then we better clean up, right? Daniel felt sick. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. His eyes darted to the phone on the nightstand. If he could grab it, call someone. Emily followed his gaze. Her face darkened. Don't. Daniel lunged for the phone. Emily was faster. She tackled him, slamming him onto the bed. The impact sent a fresh wave of pain through his skull. His vision blurred. Emily's hands wrapped around his throat. Daniel gasped, clawing at her grip. His lungs burned. His limbs thrashed. He had seconds. With all the strength he had left, he swung his fist. It connected with her ribs. She yelped, loosening her grip just enough. Daniel shoved her off, rolling onto the floor. Gasping for air, he stumbled to his feet. Emily was already up, eyes wild, teeth bared. "You're not leaving me, Daniel," she spat. "Not after everything." Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. He had one chance. He bolted. Down the hallway. Down the stairs. Emily's footsteps thundered behind him. He reached the front door, yanked it open. A sharp pain exploded in his back. He collapsed onto the porch, his body spasming. He turned his head just enough to see Emily standing over him, holding a knife. Blood dripped from the tip. His blood. His vision darkened. His body grew cold. Emily knelt beside him, stroking his hair. "Shoo," she whispered. "We'll be okay. Just stay with me." Daniel tried to speak, but his lips wouldn't move. The world faded. And then, nothing. Cold. Daniel's body felt weightless, floating between consciousness and something darker. His breath came in short, uneven gasps. A sharp, searing pain radiated from his back, pulsing with every heartbeat. He wasn't dead. Not yet. But he was close. Through hazy vision, he saw the porch light above him flickering. The night air brushed against his skin. His fingers twitched against the wooden floorboards. Then, a shadow moved. Emily. She knelt beside him, her hands smeared with blood. Her eyes, once soft and loving, now burned with something else. Something unhinged. "You ruined everything," she murmured, stroking his hair like he was some fragile doll. Daniel wanted to speak, to beg for his life, but his throat was tight. His limbs refused to move. She sighed. "I never wanted this, you know." The knife gleamed in her hand, still slick with his blood. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. His mind screamed, "Do something." But his body wouldn't listen. Emily tilted her head. "You should have just loved me. We could have been happy." His breath hitched. Was this it? Would this be how it ended, on the porch of his own home, bleeding out under the stars? A sudden noise shattered the silence. Tires screeching. A car. Headlights flashed through the trees, illuminating the driveway. Emily flinched. The knife trembled in her grip. Daniel's heart stuttered. Someone was here. Hope surged through his veins, dulling the pain. A car door slammed. "Daniel?" A familiar voice. His brother. Emily's head snapped up. Her face twisted in panic. She jumped to her feet, wiping her hands on her dress, trying to compose herself. Daniel fought to move, to scream, but his voice came out as a weak croak. Footsteps pounded up the driveway. "Daniel." The moment his brother, Matt, stepped onto the porch, his face turned white. "Jesus Christ." Emily spun toward him, forcing a trembling smile. "It's not what it looks like." Matt's gaze flicked between her and Daniel's limp body. His hands curled into fists. "What the hell did you do?" Emily let out a shaky breath. He attacked me. I had no choice." Daniel's vision blurred. His lips barely moved. "Liar." It was barely a whisper, but Matt heard it. His eyes darkened. "You did this." Emily stepped back. "Matt, you have to believe me." He was out of control. Matt lunged. Emily screamed as he grabbed her wrists, shoving her back. The knife clattered to the floor. "Call an ambulance." Matt barked, shaking her off. Emily's face twisted with fury. She scrambled for the knife. Daniel forced every ounce of strength into his voice. "Matt, watch out." Matt barely dodged as Emily slashed at him. She was wild, desperate. Her entire body trembled as she backed toward the house, clutching the blade. "You don't understand. He was leaving me. He was." Flashing red and blue lights suddenly flooded the driveway. Emily froze. The sound of sirens pierced the night. Matt exhaled sharply. "Thank God." Emily's face twisted into something broken. She looked at Daniel one last time, her lips quivering. Then, she ran. Straight into the house. Matt lunged after her, but she was too fast. Daniel barely clung to consciousness as voices echoed around him. "Sir, stay with us." Strong hands lifted him, placing pressure on his wound. He barely registered the paramedics swarming around him. The pain dulled. His mind drifted. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was Emily's silhouette disappearing inside the house. And then, nothing, pain. That was the first thing Daniel felt when he drifted back into consciousness. A deep, burning ache pulsed through his body, making it difficult to breathe. His eyelids felt like they were weighed down with bricks, but he forced them open. Bright white lights. A rhythmic beeping. The sterile scent of antiseptic. A hospital. He was alive. For a moment, everything felt unreal. His mind struggled to connect the dots. Then, the memories crashed down on him. Emily. The knife. Matt. The police. His heart rate spiked. The beeping from the monitors quickened, alerting someone outside the room. Moments later, the door swung open, and Matt rushed in. His face was lined with exhaustion, but relief flooded his eyes when he saw Daniel awake. "Jesus, man," Matt exhaled, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "You scared the hell out of me." Daniel swallowed, his throat dry. "Emily." His voice was barely above a whisper. Matt's jaw tightened. He pulled a chair close and leaned in. "She's gone." A shiver ran down Daniel's spine. "Gone?" "She ran before the cops could get to her." Matt's voice was grim. "They searched the whole house, the woods, everywhere. She vanished." Daniel's stomach twisted. He wanted to believe she had just run and disappeared, but deep down, he knew Emily. She wasn't the kind to just vanish. She was waiting. Watching. A cold chill spread through him. "She'll come back," Daniel murmured. Matt's face darkened. "That's what I'm afraid of." A knock at the door interrupted them. A man in a police uniform stepped inside. He was tall, built like a linebacker, with sharp, analyzing eyes. "Daniel Carter?" Daniel nodded weakly. "I'm Detective Harris. I need to ask you a few questions about what happened that night." Matt stood, crossing his arms. "Can this wait?" "He just woke up." Harris shook his head. "Time is critical. Emily is still out there." He looked at Daniel. "We need to know everything." Daniel exhaled shakily. "She stabbed me. I don't remember much after that." Harris frowned. "She attacked you, fled into the house, and then, nothing. No signs of forced escape. No footprints leading away from the property. It's like she disappeared into thin air." Matt scoffed. "She had to go somewhere." Harris hesitated. "There's one thing." Daniel tensed. "What?" The detective studied him. "When officers searched the house, they found something strange in the basement." Matt blinked. "The basement?" Daniel's pulse quickened. "The door was locked from the inside. And when we broke it open..." Harris hesitated. "We found something written on the walls. Words carved into the wood, over and over." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. "What did it say?" Harris's voice was low. "He belongs to me." Silence filled the room. A heavy, suffocating silence. Daniel's blood ran cold. Emily hadn't just run. She had planned something. Something worse. "Where is she?" Daniel whispered. Harris shook his head. "We don't know. But I promise you, we'll find her." Daniel wasn't so sure. Because deep down, he had a sickening feeling. Emily had already found him. Later that night. The hospital was quiet. Too quiet. Matt had left an hour ago, promising to return in the morning. The painkillers dulled Daniel's aches, but sleep refused to come. His mind was restless, replaying every horrifying moment. Somewhere in the darkness, a faint creaking noise echoed. Daniel's body tensed. The room was dimly lit by the glow of the hallway. Shadows stretched along the walls. Another creak. Closer. His breath hitched. His eyes darted toward the door. Nothing. Maybe it was just his imagination. Maybe. A whisper. Soft. Barely audible. "Daniel." His blood turned to ice. His fingers trembled as he reached for the call button, but then. The door handle twisted. Slowly. A shadow flickered through the gap beneath the door. Someone was there. His pulse thundered. He tried to move, to get up, but his body was still weak. The stitches on his back stretched painfully. The handle turned again. Then, silence. The shadow remained. Waiting. Watching. His breathing became shallow. Seconds passed like hours. Then, the shadow shifted. And disappeared. The hallway lights flickered. Daniel clenched the sheets, his entire body rigid. He wasn't safe. Not here. Not anywhere. Emily was out there. And she wasn't finished. The hospital room remained silent, but Daniel's heartbeat pounded in his ears. The shadow beneath the door had vanished, but the air felt heavy, charged with an eerie presence. He wasn't alone. Emily was close. The call button was within reach. His fingers trembled as he pressed it. Seconds stretched painfully as he waited for a nurse to respond. A soft chime echoed in the hallway. Then, footsteps. Fast. Approaching. Daniel held his breath. The door swung open, and a nurse entered, her expression calm but curious. "You okay?" Daniel's lips parted, but words failed him. He turned his head toward the door. The hallway was empty. No shadows. No Emily. Had he imagined it? I thought someone was outside," he finally whispered. The nurse's brows knitted together. "Security does regular rounds. No one suspicious has been near your room." A chill ran down his spine. Emily had been there. He was sure of it. The nurse adjusted his fore. "I can ask security to check the cameras if that'll make you feel better." Daniel nodded weakly. "Try to rest," she said before leaving. Rest? How could he? His mind reeled as he stared at the ceiling, his body tense. Emily was watching him. Waiting. The walls of the hospital felt less like protection and more like a cage. And he was trapped inside. The escape plan. Morning came, but Daniel barely slept. His body ached, but his instincts screamed, "Leave. Now." Matt arrived early, a cup of coffee in one hand, his face lined with exhaustion. "You look like hell." Daniel exhaled. "Emily was here last night." Matt froze. "What?" "I saw her shadow under the door." "I swear, Matt, she was there." Matt set his coffee down. "Security didn't see anything. Because she's smart. She's always been smart." Daniel's voice was strained. "She's not going to stop, Matt." She's waiting for the right moment. Matt rubbed his face, looking torn between concern and frustration. You're not safe here. Daniel nodded. I need to get out. Matt hesitated. You're in no condition to leave. Daniel gritted his teeth. If I stay, she'll find a way to get to me. Silence hung between them. Finally, Matt exhaled sharply. All right. But if we do this, we do it carefully. Daniel pushed himself up, wincing. Help me get dressed. Matt cursed under his breath but moved to grab Daniel's clothes. As he helped him change, he muttered, If we get caught, I'm blaming you. Daniel managed a weak smirk. Wouldn't expect anything less. Minutes later, he was in a wheelchair, a hoodie pulled over his head. Matt wheeled him out, his shoulders tense. Every hallway. Every corner. Daniel expected to see her. But Emily was nowhere in sight. That didn't mean she wasn't watching. By the time they reached the parking lot, Daniel's skin crawled with unease. The crisp morning air did little to ease the weight pressing on his chest. Matt unlocked the car. Let's go before. A sudden movement caught Daniel's eye. Across the parking lot, a figure stood near the hospital exit. A woman. Long, dark hair. A familiar silhouette. Emily. Their eyes met. A slow, chilling smile curled on her lips. Daniel's blood turned to ice. Drive, he rasped. Matt followed his gaze and swore. He shoved Daniel into the passenger seat, slammed the door, and jumped behind the wheel. The tires screeched as they sped away. Daniel turned, his breath shaky. Emily still stood there. Watching. Smiling. She let them go. Because she wanted them to run. No safe haven. Matt didn't slow down until they were miles away from the hospital. Where the hell are we going? Daniel swallowed hard. Somewhere she won't find me. Matt glanced at him. That's the problem, Dan. She always finds you. Silence. Daniel clenched his fists. He hated that Matt was right. Then I need to stop running, he murmured. Matt frowned. What are you saying? Daniel turned to him. I need to end this. Matt tightened his grip on the wheel. That sounds a lot like you're planning something stupid. Daniel exhaled. Emily won't stop until I'm dead. I need to turn the tables. Matt's expression darkened. And how do you plan to do that? Daniel's jaw tensed. There was only one place Emily would go back to. The house. Their house. The place where it all started. If I go back, Daniel said slowly, she'll come to me. Matt slammed on the brakes. The car jerked to a stop. Are you insane? Daniel met his gaze. I have to end this. Matt shook his head. No. That's exactly what she wants. You walk into that house, and you're handing her what she's been waiting for. Daniel's voice was steady. I don't have a choice. Matt gritted his teeth. Then I'm coming with you. Daniel's chest tightened. No. I can't let you. Matt raised a hand. Shut up. You're my brother. I'm not letting you walk into a damn death trap alone. Daniel exhaled, his throat tight. Matt had always been stubborn. And this time, Daniel wasn't sure if that would save them, or get them both killed. The return to the house. By nightfall, they pulled up to the house. It looked the same. And yet, different. The windows were dark. The air was thick with something unseen. Matt parked a few houses down. We go in, we look around, and we get out. Fast. Daniel nodded, but his gut told him it wouldn't be that simple. Matt grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment. Let's go. They moved in silence, their footsteps careful on the pavement. The front door loomed ahead. Matt reached for the handle. It turned easily. Unlocked. Daniel's pulse quickened. They stepped inside. The air was stale. Cold. Shadows stretched across the walls as Matt's flashlight flickered. Then. A whisper. Daniel froze. It came from the basement. Matt swallowed hard. Tell me that was the wind. Daniel's stomach churned. We both know it wasn't. A slow, deliberate creak echoed from the stairs leading down. Then, footsteps. Coming up. Matt raised the flashlight. The beam trembled slightly in his grip. The shadows at the base of the stairs shifted. And then, Emily stepped into view. Her eyes gleamed in the darkness. Her lips curled into a smile. I knew you'd come back, she whispered. Daniel's breath hitched. Emily took a slow step forward. And then, the door slammed shut behind them. Darkness swallowed the room. Matt cursed. The flashlight flickered, then went out. Daniel's heart pounded. Trapped. With her. Emily's voice drifted through the dark. Soft. Laced with amusement. Now, let's finish what we started. Darkness swallowed the room. The air was thick, suffocating. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. Trapped. Matt cursed beside him. The flashlight was dead. No light. No escape. And then. A whisper. Emily's voice slithered through the dark. I missed you, Daniel. Daniel's breath hitched. She was close. Matt's hand gripped his arm, grounding him. His voice was barely above a whisper. We need to move. Now. Daniel's throat tightened. Where? The door was shut. The windows, probably locked. And Emily, she knew this house better than anyone. A soft creak, floorboards shifting. She was moving. Daniel's instincts screamed. Do something. He lunged blindly, grabbing Matt's arm and pulling him forward. His hand met the wall. He followed it, feeling for the door. Behind them, a sharp exhale. Emily was right there. A sudden force shoved him forward. He stumbled. Matt yelped as someone, grabbed him. Matt! Daniel spun, reaching out. His fingers brushed against fabric, Emily's. She laughed. Cold. Amused. You shouldn't have come back, she whispered. A loud crack. Matt grunted. Daniel's stomach dropped. She hit him. He lunged again, swinging blindly. His fist connected with something solid, Emily's shoulder. She gasped but didn't fall. Instead, she laughed. You think you can fight me, Daniel? Her voice dripped with mockery. You never could before. Daniel's teeth clenched. A flicker of movement. Pain exploded in his side. A knife. Not deep, but enough to burn. He staggered back, clutching his side. Warmth spread beneath his palm. Blood. Matt groaned from somewhere nearby. Daniel's vision swam. Emily stepped closer. A shadow in the dark. The glint of a blade. I've always been one step ahead, she murmured. Daniel's mind raced. He was losing too much blood. He couldn't overpower her. He needed a way out. Think. The basement door. Stairs. If he could get her off balance. His breath came fast. You know what, Emily? His voice wavered, but he forced strength into it. You're right. Silence. She hesitated. Daniel took a shaky step back, toward the stairs. You were always smarter. Always knew how to stay in control. Her footsteps followed. Slow. Calculated. He kept moving. You wanted me to come back, didn't you? The knife gleamed as she tilted her head. Of course. Daniel swallowed hard. So what happens now? Emily smirked. You die. She lunged. Daniel dropped. Her momentum carried her forward. Straight over him. She tumbled, down the stairs. A scream, sharp, panicked. Then, a sickening thud. Silence. Daniel's chest heaved. His side burned. Matt groaned. Please tell me that just happened. Daniel forced himself to his feet. She's down. Matt gritted his teeth. Is she? They both looked. Emily lay at the bottom of the stairs. Still. Daniel's stomach twisted. It wasn't over. Slowly, painfully, he descended. Each step sent a jolt of pain through his side. Emily's chest rose and fell. Alive. Her eyes fluttered open. Daniel's breath caught. For the first time, fear flickered in her gaze. She was hurt. Weak. Vulnerable. He crouched beside her, gripping his bleeding side. It's over, Emily. Her lips parted. Daniel. A sob. Real. Raw. Or another trick? Daniel's fists clenched. He refused to fall for it. Sirens wailed in the distance. Matt must have called them. Emily's eyes glistened. You loved me once. Daniel's throat tightened. I did. A tear slipped down her cheek. Then don't leave me. Daniel swallowed hard. You left me a long time ago. The sirens grew louder. Emily's fingers twitched. Reaching. Daniel stepped back. Matt's voice echoed from above. They're here. Flashing lights filled the windows. Emily's lips trembled. For the first time, she knew she had lost. The door burst open. Officers stormed in. One look at the scene, and guns were drawn. Emily didn't resist. She simply laughed. And then, they took her away. The aftermath. Daniel sat on the hospital bed, fresh bandages covering his wounds. Matt leaned against the wall. She's in custody. No bail. They found enough evidence to keep her locked up for good. Daniel nodded. Relief should have come. But all he felt was exhaustion. Matt studied him. You okay? Daniel exhaled. I will be. The past couldn't be erased. The scars, inside and out, would never fully heal. But for the first time in a long time, he was free. And that? That was enough.